Welcome back, Mr. Tambadou. I would once again remind you that you are on the before the break, we were discussing issues around the employment of Ramatullah Sar as Deputy Permanent Secretary, as well as her role at the Commission of Inquiry. And I would wish to move on to the lifetime of the Commission and whatever role you played during the lifetime of the Commission. Now, before I do that, I would wish to reiterate, or rather just establish a few things that we had already established, just for the record. The High Court order, it was the government's way of preserving the assets. That's correct. Yeah?
Yeah, that's correct.
It was, and it was granted by the court.
That's correct.
This was before the Commission of Inquiry came into being.
That's correct.
And the Commission would have been aware of the High Court order.
I assume so.
It was not put to them by the ministry, the High Court order. So that is a fundamental thing that they should have.
The High Court order was a matter of public knowledge, so I don't recall the ministry ever putting it specifically to the Commission. It was a matter of public knowledge. Not only was there a High Court order, but I had held a press conference after the order to announce the order to the public.
Just please just say that last part about the public.
I said not only was the freezing order public, but I convened a press conference after the order to announce it to the public.
Yes, but yet still, certain institutions did not get the memo, did not get in the information, and those are institutions within government.
Yeah, but Council, I mean, we need to be careful when you say that, because you yourself told me, because you were duty bound, you said that Gilmer did receive communication from the Ministry of Agriculture.
I don't wish to open up that kind
Yeah, I
of
know,
worms
but
again.
when you say certain government department didn't get it, you can question the timeliness of the information, but not the actual fact that the information was received.
Well, in fact, the government department did not get it. The department responsible for wildlife did not get the memo at all.
Okay.
And perhaps the one you're referring to, Gilmer, they got it, but they got it late. And well, not late. Let me withdraw that. I would withdraw that. They got it. It was not as timely as it should have been, perhaps. But they still received the information, and they asked for more clarification, and they also stated that they don't have the capacity to do what they're being asked to do.
The order was end of May. They got it in June. We have not yet established when in June.
Well, it is the 4th of June.
Council, that's information that is critical for the record here. The order was issued on the 22nd of May. If you work the number of working days between 22nd of May and 31st of May, that's a relatively short time for communications between ministries and their departments in government.
I would agree with you. However, the first day we converged here, we spoke about the environment at the time, and there was speed and all those. There was urgency. So for that, and also the assets we're talking about here are assets that are not static. They're livestock.
Yes.
They can easily be moved around. They can easily be rigged with disease. They could easily be slaughtered by one major, you know, as they were. So there was urgency needed.
Yes, and the urgency was before the order. Since the order, the army was securing the locations where these livestock were.
But
as far as I knew.
from the evidence we've received here, although not in an explicit manner, the evidence goes to suggest that the army had taken control from when the government sat, even before any conception of a commission was sought.
Yes, that's my understanding
Talk
as
less
well.
of the application.
Absolutely, that's my understanding as well.
Yes, so the army had control from when the government was seated. But you see, the army was not referenced in the order. I don't wish to go back to the order.
Yeah, I know, because, well, the deductions from your theory is that because there was a delay in communicating the order, therefore there was potential loss of livestock as a result of that delay. Now, that's not necessarily the case, because the army, as far as we knew, was already securing the locations where these cattle were.
At the behest of who?
I don't know, because you see,
Then the properties then weren't secured, were they?
Sorry?
The properties then weren't secured.
But the government had no obligation to secure. They were private properties up to that point.
Then why were the army there or private?
Well, maybe you should ask the one who put the army there in the first place.
Then perhaps what we can say is that the government had not taken control of the assets yet.
As at that time,
so
yes.
Nobody was accountable per se.
Exactly.
So when from on the 22nd day of May is when the government started to be accountable for.
That's right.
For those, yes. And
that's right. That's when the order was issued.
And that order was a preservatory order for the assets.
Yep.
And in fact, the attachment to your affidavit to the court, which attachment was endorsed by the court and attached in its own order, is the same attachment on the legal notice.
Mm.
Is that news to you? Or?
I'm not sure.
I could provide you both. You
know, Counsel, you're getting into, again, the operational details. And at that time, I will say again.
That's fine.
And I'll say it for the 1000th time. Mm-hmm. I did not have time to look after livestock in view of the situation in this country. What is the Minister of Justice doing following livestock? Especially at the moment when there was chaos. And we were preoccupied with other more important matters of state. Security, stability, peace. Those were the pressing issues. So really, the cows and the goats and sheep were not on my priority list. I keep repeating this.
All right. So I can appreciate your perspective. The livestock were still assets, and once the government declared them as assets by virtue of going to the court, there was need for the government to secure them.
And that's why we identified the government department that we thought was best suited to take charge of the livestock, which was Gilmer.
Yes, the agency.
Yes.
Very well. However, they did not get that memo.
You just said that they received information from their ministry on the 4th of June.
Yes.
But you don't know when the Ministry of Justice wrote to the Minister of Agriculture.
That evidence is not before us. And that's perhaps where yes. You can help us enlighten.
Well, I wouldn't write. I wouldn't be the one who would write the letter from the, like I said, government communicates at certain levels.
Yes.
It would be from the Solicitor General to the permanent secretary of the Minister of Agriculture. Now, I don't know when that letter was written. I wouldn't even be interested at that time to know. For me, once the issue has been decided to inform, it will be done. So I wouldn't follow on like I said, it was not high on my priority list.
All right, that's fine. I don't wish to belabor on this point anyway. I just you've given me my answer that the assets were preserved.
No, I just intervened because you said some government departments were not informed, and most of our discussion centered around Gilmer, not wildlife. So that's why I said you yourself told me you felt duty bound to tell me that Gilmer did receive communication from the Agriculture Ministry.
Indeed.
And this is after I had insisted that if there were going to be communications, it would have been between the ministries, because Gilmer is, Agriculture Ministry is the line ministry for Gilmer. You've just confirmed to me that they received it on the 4th of June.
Yes, we have evidence that.
Yes, the order was issued on the 22nd of May.
Yes.
If you count the number of working days, between the 22nd and 31st. That's a short time, relatively speaking. Now,
I understand. Contextualize it.
No, but the urgency came before the need to act quickly, etc., for the government to take charge. Once the government took charge, that's why I went and issued a press conference. At that point, we were giving notice to the public that these acts have been taken so that those who were thinking of interfering with the assets would now know that there is an order preventing people from interfering with the assets.
So that's the de jure aspect of it. What about the de facto aspect of it?
Now, we knew that Gilmer would be challenged. Gilmer did inform, as far as I was informed, that they had challenges. But you see, the idea of handing over to Gilmer was not for Gilmer to physically go and take over the cattle. We already knew that the army was there already. It was for Gilmer to take stock and to be administratively responsible for the livestock. We knew Gilmer didn't have the capacity. These were in the hundreds, these livestock. And that's why I guess the army was in control at that time.
All right. I wish to move on from this point. We have deliberated over it enough. But I would want to state that the livestock were quite valuable. In fact, they were the most messy. The process of selling the livestock was the most messy process the commission had in its disposal of assets. Yet still, it raked in about 8.4 million, and if it was done properly, it could have raked in double or even triple, who knows, more that amount. So just to state that the livestock were indeed valuable.
You know, I'm not pretending that the livestock were not valuable at all. I'm just saying, as far as the Justice Ministry was concerned, as at that time, it was not high on my list of priorities. That's because there were several other more pressing matters, including the conducive environment to even preserve that livestock. It was a very tense period in the country at the time.
Okay, that's fine. Let's speak of the lifetime of the commission. How did you envision your working relationship with the commission once they had begun? And when I say your, I mean the government. The government's working relationship with the commission. How does the government communicate with the commission administratively? How does the government also approach the commission if it's interested in one or more of the subject matter that the commission is abreast with?
Ordinarily, that would be done through the Ministry of Justice. And as far as the ministry itself was concerned, again, at the risk of repeating myself, I had the approach of a production line. There were a lot of activities lined up in our transitional justice process. So when a commission was set up and they start their activities, I adopt a hands-off approach and start to focus on the next bit of activity in the other commissions. So we adopted at the ministry, at least I can speak for myself, we adopted a hands-on, hands-off approach. Hands-on approach to make sure that everything was put in place, and once they kick off, we adopt a hands-off approach and not get involved again unless a specific matter is brought to our attention for our intervention. That's when we would indeed get involved again. But otherwise, we adopted a hands-off approach. Now, as for the rest of government, I don't know. You know, government is a huge beast. It's not just the Ministry of Justice. Government departments are many, several. And I don't know what the relationship in terms of communications was between the commission and other government departments, but certainly the proper and usual thing was through the Ministry of Justice.
If it would arise that the government needed one or two of the assets, how would the government approach the commission in that instance? I ask it again because what you answered is administrative.
Maybe we should evolved from theory to practice, and I will cite an example, the first and perhaps only example that I have.
So perhaps just give us, let's indulge me on the theory for now.
Yes.
I promise you I would not go more than 2 more questions until we get to the practical.
Well, because the answer to that theory is you have to contextualize these things. Issues happen right at the start, and then with time things evolve and settle to a pattern. And so that's why the theory does not specifically address the issues that you may have in mind. That's why I wanted us to take concrete examples. Things did happen at the beginning, but then with time things evolve and settle to a pattern.
Feel free.
Okay. If you were specifically referring to the request by the government for the tractors not to be sold, would that be an example of what you have in mind? So
Yeah.
yes, so there was early in the days after the commission was set up, when the government became aware, I believe it was the Ministry of Agriculture that became aware that the commission was about to dispose of certain tractors. And the Minister of Agriculture, I recall in cabinet, did float the idea that maybe perhaps the commission should defer the sale of those tractors until the government decides what to do with them. What he had in mind, I recall, in the discussions was he wanted to distribute those tractors to some of the farming communities across the country in view of the approaching rainy season. And so the issue was discussed in cabinet, and it was resolved that the Office of Secretary General will write to the Commission to request for a deferment of the sale of the tractors until the government decides what to do, and then the Commission will be contacted thereafter regarding that. And I believe that was done. A letter was written by the Office of Secretary General addressed to the Commission.
Okay, so in essence, the communication will be through the Ministry of Justice and for a letter to for administrative tools to be exchanged.
For the Ministry of Justice would be the usual channel of communication for administrative matters, but the matter that I'm talking about here is a substantive request by the government.
And how would the government then approach it? By through a letter?
Yes, the Secretary, that's why I explained, the Secretary General had written to the Commission to request for the Commission to defer the sales of the tractors.
What would you call that?
A request?
A request.
Yes.
And was it intended to be a legal request?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I made sure.
We will get to that.
Okay. I made sure in cabinet that because I recall the discussions in cabinet. You see, some of these things are as a result of people's lack of understanding of certain processes and procedures. The idea was to tell the Commission, and if the minutes reflect the discussions accurately, they would reveal that I said we can't interfere in the work of the Commission, but we can request certainly. That was clearly stated.
And was it clearly stated to Cabinet that if the request was declined or not heeded to, then Cabinet would have to leave the Commission alone?
But that's what happened. The request was not heeded to, and the Commission carried out its activities notwithstanding.
Is that what happened?
But that's what happened.
Okay, let's look into that. I was not in a hurry to get to that, but let's look at that and before we look at it in specific, let's look at your discussions in cabinet. How did cabinet understand the selling of assets by the commission?
I don't understand.
That's fine. Did cabinet appreciate the fact that the commission could sell assets, or did it hold the contrary view?
Well, there were discussions in cabinet about whether the commission could sell the assets.
Please enlighten the committee.
There were discussions.
The nature of the discussion.
Well, there were some who questioned whether the commission had the power to do so, and there were some who were of the view that they did.
So that was a question of law.
Indeed.
But did the Ministry of Justice or yourself, did you weigh in on the conversation?
Absolutely.
Please enlighten the public.
It was my view that the commission had the power to take interim measures, including but not limited to the power to dispose of assets that were at the risk of perishing.
And was there a conclusion made on that cabinet discussion?
It didn't matter what cabinet discussed or decided. The commission was acting irrespective of what cabinet thought. They were acting independently.
Sure, but was there a conclusion on that?
In cabinet?
Yes.
But a conclusion to say what?
To say that the commission can sell or not?
No, I mean, that wouldn't be a cabinet conclusion, because that's a legal matter. It was just in the context of discussions in cabinet about whether the commission could or could not dispose of any assets at interim.
It is evidence received by the committee that it was cabinet's position that the commission could not sell assets.
There were discussions, certainly, but cabinet could not conclude one way or the other on something that is not within their powers. The commission was acting irrespective of what cabinet thought. So the conclusion would pretty much serve no useful purpose. But it was my position as Attorney General that the commission had the power to take interim measures, including the power to dispose of assets at risk of perishing.
Okay, let's look at that. There was already a preservatory mechanism put in place by your esteemed office, by the government through your esteemed office. That was the High Court order, and that preserved the assets as far as you're concerned, correct? Those assets were identified by the bulk of those assets were identified by your team.
Yes.
Through the Registrar General. Of course, the office of the IGP also assisted heavily in the case of the vehicle, and a list was prepared. When you went to court, the court gave the Registrar General custody of all movable and immovable assets. Now, we understand from our deliberations early on that would exclude all the other assets that were assigned to specific authorities, such as the wildlife, the livestock, and the shares to companies. But it would include every other asset that the order was silent on, such as the land, such as...
the order was not silent
vehicles.
on the land. The order included the lands because a lot of the lands were in the name of companies that were also the subject of a freezing order.
Okay. But a lot of the lands were also not.
Yes, that's why we had the default position of the Registrar General.
Registrar General.
Yes.
And because of that default position, he was the person responsible to take control of the vehicles.
Which vehicles?
The vehicles invented by the task force.
But you see, if you recall my evidence on the vehicles and the advice that I had given to the late Secretary General at the time, that the vehicles that were found on state property are assumed to be property or are assumed to be state property until the contrary is proved.
Yes. Is there a point?
Yes, the point is I don't know which vehicles you were assuming were part of the freezing order.
The vehicles that were part of an inventory list compiled by the task force led by the Ministry of Justice.
Yes, but the freezing order had attachment. The task force inventorized the properties, but the freezing order was clear about the attachments that were part of the freezing order, which is why when we obtained a supplementary list of properties, we went again in July to also freeze those additional properties.
So what you're saying is that the vehicles were not part of the responsibility of the Registrar General?
Yes, we didn't seek to freeze those vehicles.
Okay, fair enough. So back to the sale, the interference or lack thereof by the government. The commission decided that it would sell vehicles,
Tractors.
mostly yes, they are vehicles, mostly tractors. They were vehicles that were not tractors, although they were not civilian vehicles in a sense.
Okay.
But they were construction vehicles that were sold with the tractors.
As at that time, I wasn't aware of that. I was aware of the tractors certainly, but maybe that's because the agriculture minister raised the issue of the tractors in cabinet.
That's fine. So when that issue, when the sales began, the secretary to the commission was sorry, I'm just thinking whether I want to dive into that issue at this minute. But yes, the secretary to the commission was conducting the sales, was supervising the sales at the Kotu workshop, when a phone call was received by him. It's the evidence from Mr. Alhaji Mohammed Kuran. And he explains that he was asked to, he was informed that an order should be conveyed to him. Instructions should be conveyed to him.
He was told by whom?
I'm getting to that. He was told by the secretary to cabinet at the time, one Mr. Ibrahim Asisi, that he was instructed by his superior, the Secretary General, one
Habib
Drame, that cabinet has decided that the sale of tractors should be suspended, and he should suspend it right away. I believe he informed Mr. Sise that he could not do that because he's not answerable to Mr. Sise, and he's only answerable to the commissioners. And Mr. Kurang explains that he was not at the site at the time, so he continued his journey to proceed to the site. And when he got to the site, he met a gentleman who was accompanied by his orderly, and the orderly seemed to be searching around for him, and found him and asked whether he was Mr. Kurang, and took him to his principal, who then reiterated the same thing, and Mr. Kurang stood by the same position that he took over the phone. Now, this was the beginning of the end for Mr. Kurang from that moment. I know, and I'll allow you to weigh in. But before we focus on Mr. Kurang, I would like to focus on the activity, the interference.
The interference?
Yes. From the evidence we have.
I'm not sure I would call that interference, but anyway, go ahead.
From the evidence we have,
yes,
the phone call mentioned instructions. And on the site as well, he was told to shut things down. In fact, Mr. Sise attempted to inform the public that no such auction would, the auction is cancelled and it will not hold. So I do call it interference, but please feel free to comment on that.
What is Mr. Sise's version of events? He appeared here. Was this put to him?
Yeah, of course it was.
Yes.
The tenants of Aldi Alterem Fatem are heavily dared by this honorable committee.
Okay.
So we hear from all parties. Mr. Sise's version, paraphrasing, if I can recall well, was that when he arrived at the MSA...
How about the phone call first? Did he confirm the words chosen by?
In fact, he initially said that he could not reach Quran on the phone, and he went to MSA and that's where he got in contact with Quran. But after a few minutes of a push and pull between myself and Mr. Cisse, we established that indeed he got Mr. Quran.
He could have forgotten and he remembered following your exchanges. You read too much into these things, Council. Eh?
I don't. I'm just saying the facts. I believe you're the one reading too much into it. I'm not. I did not insinuate anything. But yes, after push and pull, I jogged his memory.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how you want me to put it. I jogged his memory, and he was able to remember the phone call. I don't believe Mr. Cisse gave us the content of the phone call or what occurred when the phone call was made. But what he was explicit about was that when he arrived at MSA, he sat in his car and asked his orderly to look for Mr. Kurang. And Mr. Kurang eventually found him, and they had words, and he left.
Did he reveal the contents of that exchange?
Well,
because you were making a specific allegation that Mr. Kurang made against Mr. Cisse.
yes.
I would like to know what Mr. Cisse's
If I
specific response was.
recall well, perhaps if I can ask the IT team to prepare footage of that specific testimony between
just from your recollection, really. Yeah.
Myself and Mr. Cisse. But if I recall well, Mr. Cisse, in fact, was of the view that they were instructions.
Okay, that he had received instructions.
Yes.
Okay. So what would be your question to me about that?
You can react to it first before I pose the question.
I don't have any reaction to that. All I can tell you is the exchanges in cabinet, the different positions, and my position, and my advice that a request be made to the commission to defer the sale of the tractors. Now, I don't know how that request was conveyed. I would be happy to see a copy of that request if you have it here, but that was my advice.
In fact, I don't believe we have a copy of that request. Actually, we don't have. Let me actually state that we don't have a copy of that request. We have mountains of evidence. It is not part of the evidence. However, we do have viva voce evidence from Mr. Cisse stating that that cabinet decided that the Minister of Justice, yourself, would be the one to go to the commissioners since this activity was impending. When cabinet held its last session on this matter, the sales had already started. They had already begun. And it was for the Minister of Justice to speak, to make the request and report back immediately. I don't believe cabinet envisioned that the ministry would write. From Mr. Cisse's evidence, although he did not state so, I must say, but this is my deduction of this evidence, that it was for the Minister of Justice to approach the commissioners, speak to them, and report back. And the minister did speak to them and report back, from Mr. Cisse's recollection. But please go ahead.
Well, you have given me Mr. Cisse's evidence that I spoke to the commission and went back to cabinet. Maybe you should ask the commission if I ever spoke with them about this.
We actually will. And right now we are asking your humble self.
Well, because it is said that I spoke to the commission.
Did you speak to the commission?
You see, so the commission is in a better position than I am to either confirm or deny that.
True. Did you speak to the commission on this issue? Or the commission as well?
I don't recall, and I have said this many times, ever attempting to interfere in the work of the commission. And the reason why in cabinet I was of the view that they can only request and not tell the commission because the commission was functioning